Welcome to the tutorial for lesson number 8 of Celtic Christianity Online. This week we will take a look at carving the spirituality of the cross. Our journey will unfold in two parts. In the first we will lay the theoretical groundwork for our discussion, while in the second we will examine specific examples from the Isles. A note before we begin. Many of the names that appear in this lesson are of Gaelic origins. As such, they are pronounced very differently than they appear in English. I would like to take the opportunity to apologize for any mispronunciations which may occur over the course of the lesson. The Celtic High Cross is perhaps one of the most recognized symbols of Celtic Christianity. It is a large stone cross which has been freed from the shape of the stone surrounding it. Typically, this takes the form of a Latin cross, which is a cross with a longer stem in comparison to the arms, with a ring added around the intersection of the shaft and arms. We see many monumental crosses appear in Eastern Christianity from the 4th and 5th century onward. It should be noted that only in certain places within Western Europe do ornamented and figural high cross stones appear, mainly in England, Wales, the Isle of Man, Ireland, and Scotland. While Eastern Christians begin making monumental crosses in the 4th or 5th century, Celtic high crosses only begin to appear around the 8th century and are produced up into the 12th. The Celtic high cross serves three principal functions. First, they were used as the focal point for liturgical prayer, as seen within the reading of De Waldera. Second, they serve as grave monuments. And third, they serve to delineate the area of the church sanctuary. Think back to lesson number 3, where we see stones being used for these same purposes in prehistoric times. The Celtic crosses themselves stand mostly between 10 and 15 feet high. This includes the base it rests upon, and were carved mostly out of sandstone, although there are examples of Celtic crosses being carved from granite and limestone. Although the cross has become an important symbol within Christianity in modern times, it has not always been so. It should be noted that crucifixion was a Roman method of execution, used for enemies of the state. Jesus was seen as such by the Roman occupiers of Palestine and put to death in this manner. As well, we see within the first few centuries of the Common Era, many Christians being put to death for witnessing their faith. This will come to be seen as the Red Martyrdom. As such, the cross is not used in Christian iconography for the first 4 centuries after Jesus' execution. Through the centuries of contemplation of the meaning of Jesus' death, in the light of the experience of faith in his resurrection, as well as the passing of time from the lived horror of crucifixions increased, the cross then became a symbol of God's utter self-giving in Christ. Many biblical passages were used to build this understanding. We'll take a moment just to look at a few of them now. One interpretation of the crucifixion event is that a ransom had been paid. A ransom is the payment, usually in goods or money, for the freedom of slaves within the ancient world. Therefore, Jesus had paid the ransom to free humanity from sin. As taken from 1 Timothy chapter 2, he, Jesus, desires everyone to be saved, and gave himself as a ransom for all. Another way of interpreting this event is through kenosis, which is the ancient Greek word for emptiness. Jesus' acceptance of his death is seen as God's act of self-emptying and self-giving for the world. From Philippians chapter 2, he emptied himself to the point of death on a cross. The crucifixion narrative may also be seen as a refusal, specifically the refusal by Jesus to enter into an antagonistic reaction to coercive power, and therefore becomes the model for humanity's refusal. You are invited to examine the dialogue between Jesus and the Roman prefect Pontius Pilate in John chapter 18. You will see within it that Jesus refuses to enter into that kind of a combative relationship with Pontius Pilate. Finally, the crucifixion of Christ may be seen in light of the Paschal Mystery, also known as the Easter Mystery. The paradoxical yet essential link between death and new life, between letting go and receiving the gift of life or grace, as seen through Jesus' death and resurrection. The symbol which comes to be utilized in regards to these four readings of the crucifixion narrative is the ringed cross. This is a precursor to the Celtic high cross, known as the Roman labarum, or the Chi-Rho monogram. Note the use of chi, or x, and rho, p, which, as mentioned in Lesson 7, are the first two Greek letters of the word Christ, or Christos. The Chi-Rho is encircled by a wreath of victory, and was first used by Constantine in the 4th century. Another example of a labarum may be seen within this fresco, from a Romano-British villa in Kent. Again we see the Chi-Rho, encircled by a triumphal wreath. Note as well the A and W, A standing for Alpha, while the W in Greek is the symbol for Omega, therefore the beginning and the end. The labarum symbol changes when it reaches the Isles, specifically in terms of Irish carvings. We see here that the Chi-Rho becomes a ringed cross shape. This is a representation of a cross slab from the late 5th century in Galloway, Scotland. We see as well another example from a tombstone of an Irish king, roughly a century later. This ringed cross shape is not only reminiscent of the labarum, but also of the Coptic cross, within the Maltese style as seen here. This particular cross was carved on the wall of a temple to Isis in Upper Egypt. Ancient temples were sometimes converted for use in Christian worship. Note the similar pattern of the cross and the ring. As mentioned in Lesson 7, there was much cultural trade between the Isles and Eastern Christians. Another example of this cultural trade may be seen in the Coptic textile of a jeweled cross. This specific textile originates from Egypt and was produced between the 5th and 6th century. Note that this is a Roman cross. Much like in illuminations and texts, religious images in textiles are also highly symbolic. For example here, the ring of fruits symbolizes fecundity, new life, nourishment, as well as victory. There appears as well around the borders various types of flowers, which are representative of new life and flourishing. If you take a close look at the intersection between the arm and the stem, you will see 4 plus symbols, or Greek crosses. It is possible that these are representative of the 4 evangelists. The jewels within the cross itself, number 16. It has been suggested that this number is representative of the 12 apostles and the 4 evangelists. Finally, this particular cross features mortise and tenon construction. This suggests a removable processional cross, and may reflect the actual construction of a Celtic high cross. Note as well the stepped base, which suggests the hill of Calvary, or the place of Christ's crucifixion. Compare then this Coptic textile to the typical form of a Celtic high cross. You may notice that there are many similarities, from the Romanized style cross, to the ring, or wreath of victory, to even the sloped base. Eastern Christians were not the only ones engaging in cultural contacts with the Isles. This is suggested by the appearance of another Celtic-looking cross from a Frankish manuscript. This page is taken from the Galician Sacramentary, produced in the 8th century. Note again the Latin cross, with central ring, as well as the Alpha and Omega symbols, and various ringed crosses. Turning now to the Isles, remember that the actual stone crosses were believed to emerge from the undressed or uncrafted stone. There is a sense that they were always lying in wait for the artist's arrival. Seen here is the Duvalon stone slab from County Mayo. This slab would have been carved somewhere between the 6th and 10th centuries. Note that it is often very difficult to determine exactly when a stone would have been created. Most often, scholars are able to determine the stone's rough age either through other supporting documentation or the art style in which the images appear on it. Featured here on the left is a crucifixion scene, while on the right you may observe a ringed Maltese cross. A more detailed example of this is seen on the Fahamora slab cross. This slab was carved in the 7th century in County Donegal, Ireland. This stone cross measures 6.5 feet now, yet measures 9 feet when cleared of the surrounding earth. In this instance, the rough stone was dressed, shaped, or carved to accommodate the cross shape. Although this is a very intricate design, we see as well within the Isles simpler designs of the cross on stone markers. Take for example the Loher pillar, also from the 7th century, in County Kerry, Ireland. Note again the Alpha and the Omega. The association of Alpha and Omega, or the beginning and the end, harkens back to a passage from Revelation 1:8. Another example of a cross slab is the Kilagety wheel cross, also from the 7th century in County Donegal. Note, not only is this a wheel cross, but it also features a triple knot in the lower right-hand corner. Recall once again Neolithic and Bronze Age stone monuments in the Isles. We discussed this back in lesson number 3, specifically within slides 10 to 13. There is a long pre-Christian history of spiritual expression in monumental stones or megaliths, many of whom are found along the coasts. Landscape was seen during this time period as being layered, meaning that Iron Age Celts repurposed Neolithic sites and monuments. Likewise, Celtic Christians repurposed pre-Christian sites and monuments. As such, many of the standing stones used in Celtic Christianity would have originated from these earlier cultures. And with that, we come to the end of part 1. Join me for part 2, where we will examine specific examples from across the Isles. As always, the link is in the description below. I'll see you in just a moment.